Well, that's it for Genesis Sparkster, aka Rocket Knight Adventures 2. Now, it's time for Super NES Sparkster, which if you remember is actually a spin-off, not a sequel.
Right away you'll notice that Super NES Sparkster borrows more from Rocket Knight Adventures. Your sword shoots energy and you now must charge your rocket pack manually. Oh, and that awesome track from Genesis Sparkster is also here. Fuck, I love this song. Now, I'll admit that I wasn't too impressed with this game at first, and that's because I didn't know how I was supposed to play it. At first, I thought you shot way too fast and had so little control over yourself, especially as you fall. I found it very disorienting and frustrating, and wrote it off, giving it the dreaded difficult because it's unfair label. But then I discovered the quick slash you can do with the L and R buttons, and it all clicked. It jumped from frustrating to fun and intuitive. Between the two Sparkster games, it's the one change to the Rocket Knight Adventures formula that actually improves upon it. It improves both platforming and combat, avoiding potholes found in Genesis Sparkster and Rocket Knight Adventures. You'll remember that in the original, the blade of your sword was much more powerful than the energy that shot from it, but you had to get dangerously close to enemies. But if you did, you'd stick the enemy with a ton of quick consecutive hits. Sometimes an enemy would pass through you as you kept hitting it, leaving you unharmed. A cool feature for sure, but sometimes made things a little too easy. Now this is absent from Super NES Sparkster, but with the L&R attacks you can essentially do just that. Pass through an enemy, damaging it, leaving you unharmed and able to move and prepare for the next attack. Though it can be tricky to pull off, so don't get too cocky. And this avoids the frustrating pothole of Genesis Sparkster, of having a nearly useless sword and having to gamble all the time with your rocket pack, so combat all around is much better. And same for the platforming too. Sometimes something is just out of reach with a jump, but a rocket blast would be too much. Bam, just slice your way in. And it also helps that our hero controls much smoother here than he did in Genesis Sparkster. I made the mistake of misjudging this game before I knew how I was supposed to play it, and I hope you don't make the same mistake because this edition alone makes Super NES Sparkster a much less frustrating and more enjoyable experience than Genesis Sparkster.
But all I'm saying is that it's better than Genesis Sparkster. It still doesn't touch the genius of Rocket Knight Adventures. While I found most of Genesis Sparkster to be frustrating and difficult, I found Super NES Sparkster to be pretty easy, save for a few really frustrating boss fights. But level design and boss fights in both games are pretty dodgy when compared to the original Rocket Knight Adventures.
I take back what I said about the boxing match in Genesis Sparkster, because while this is just a rehash, this is just awful. But then again, the level that precedes this in Super NES Sparkster is a cool little shooter, while the level that precedes this is a poorly executed borefest. This mini-boss in Genesis Sparkster is pretty cool, but can take forever. On the other hand, this boss on Super NES Sparkster is really cool, but a total pushover. I can probably trace all my displeasure of Genesis Sparkster to level 3. I hate everything about this level. From this confusing garbage, to this surprisingly hard side-scrolling part, to this stupid annoying boss. On the other hand, what is this, Music Land? What am I playing, Rystar here? In terms of bosses and levels, both games have their memorable and poorly implemented moments, but Super NES Sparkster edges out over Genesis Sparkster. But one thing all three Rocket Knight games have is an awesome nemesis, Axel Gear. He's just an evil Black Knight version of our boy Sparkster, and almost every fight with the Black Knight is challenging and memorable, whether it's boxing, flying, or just swords, regardless if it's Rocket Knight Adventures or Sparkster. Now, they're not all perfect, like I just mentioned, but they're usually the highlight of the game. I'm putting this out there. Most underrated video game rivalry of all time. Especially the mano-a-mano fights. You're essentially fighting your doppelganger, and for as much fun as it is to control Sparkster, it's just as much fun to fight him. It's worth struggling through Genesis Sparkster just for that fight with Axel Gear at the end. Seriously, these two were made for Smash Brothers.
Overall, both games have their strengths and weaknesses. However, it's difficult to recommend them because of how expensive they are, but I guess if I had to choose one, of course it's Super NES Sparkster. But the fact remains, Rocket Knight Adventures is better than both in every way possible, and is cheaper and more common. But it goes without saying that if you find any of these games for cheap, or if they're ever put on Virtual Console, you buy them immediately. But the question still remains, why were 2 sequels produced instead of just 1? Well, put on your tinfoil hats, cause I have my theories.
It's rumored that the original Rocket Knight Adventures was going to be ported to the Super Nintendo, as evidenced not just by this Wikipedia article, but also by the fact that the original Rocket Knight Adventures team is given a special thanks in the credits. As the rumor goes, the port was cancelled, but it's my belief that it was actually just reworked into a sequel, which explains why Super NES Sparkster resembles Rocket Knight Adventure so much, and plays so much better than Genesis Sparkster. It was probably in development for longer. But Rocket Knight Adventures was a Genesis game, made with the intent not just to make a successful franchise, but one for the Genesis. Again, this is all just speculation, but to avoid burning bridges with Genesis owners, remember this was during the 16-bit console wars, there may have been an 11th hour decision to make a sequel for the Genesis instead. But the former Super NES port turned official sequel was too far along and had cost too much money to simply be aborted. So the decision was then to make 2 sequels for both platforms. Konami painted themselves into a corner. They were sort of forced to make 2 sequels. However, this doesn't explain why they're both called Sparkster. That was just stupid.
It may have been a bad business decision, but Konami clearly deserves credit for their ambition, which is why I do feel bad for ragging on these games so hard. Neither Sparkster game feels as though they ran out of good ideas, just out of time to refine and polish 2 whole games, which is totally understandable. It was a ballsy move for Konami, which I can admire.
However, Konami's ambitions proved too grand, and in the end this became the undoing of the series. But only if there's any truth to my tinfoil hat speculations. Whatever actually happened, neither game was successful, and our buddy Sparkster soon faded off into mainstream obscurity, but was kept alive thanks to numerous underground fans, the occasional cameo, and the fact that the original game aged like fine wine. That was until October 2009, almost 15 years later, when Konami announced that Climax Studios will be making a 4th game, simply called Rocket Knight, for Xbox Live Arcade, PlayStation Network, and Steam.
Hell yeah, Sparkster is back! But as for my rule with modern games, Rocket Knight has been pretty well spoken for at this point, so there's not a whole lot for me to say. But I know a lot of people want to know what I think, so here you go.
I can't say I'm crazy about the look of the game. Sparkster is a little too small for me to appreciate all his goofy and badass expressions, so he's underused as a character. Our boy's got a ton of moves, and as always, he's a ton of fun to control. Climax took many mechanics from Genesis Sparkster, only instead doing it right. But I can't shake the feeling they just stuck our forever dude into a subpar action platformer. He's got all the familiar moves, and even a few new ones, but the levels are nothing spectacular. I really like the level where your jetpack keeps freezing, but nothing else stood out. It continues the series' streak of releasing competent and enjoyable titles, but I'll be honest, it's probably the most forgettable of the 4. But to clarify, it certainly feels better put together than Genesis Sparkster, but it's just too, safe. The music is entirely forgettable. Yes, that first level's orchestrated rendition is excellent, but after that, nothing really stood out. And I'm sorry, but Stuttering Craig, you're out of your goddamn mind if you think this soundtrack is better than the originals. Love you, dude. See you at MacFest. The rest of the music in Rocket Knight provides an appropriate ambience, complementing the tone of each level, but makes no attempt to make itself memorable or catchy. Such is the case with most modern games. But with such an amazing library of tunes to remix and orchestrate, it blows my mind they came to the conclusion to produce a soundtrack of almost completely original music. Just imagine how good this song would have sounded. Now, I don't mean to sound ungrateful to the hardworking folks at Climax, because I can imagine that a Rocket Knight reboot was a really tough sell, apparently taking 2 years and 4 pitches just to get a green light on the project. Tom Hewlett, the same man who made Silent Hill and Contra relevant again, apparently was dying to get a new Sparkster game made since he joined the company in late '06, so he gets huge brownie points for bringing back the series in the first place. And did anyone honestly expect this game to compare to the original? In all fairness, it met my expectations, but I have to side with the critics on this one. Rocket Knight is pretty short and a bit on the easy side. That is, until near the very end, where it suddenly gets really tough. But at 1,200 points, or $15, it is overpriced. Braid, Limbo, Mega Man 9, Perfect Dark, and Bit Trip Runner are a much better use of your time and points. Or better yet, get yourself a Genesis in the original Rocket Knight Adventures.
However, my only hope is that this game did do well enough to merit an official, full-fledged reboot for Sparkster. I wish you luck, Mr. Hewlett. Not just because there's a chance you've seen my Rocket Knight Adventures review and that you're watching this, but because I'm sure you know, more than anyone, that there is still greatness to be mined from this franchise. So in conclusion, the Rocket Knight or Sparkster games are 4 titles that amount to a pretty solid series. Genesis Sparkster was a bit underwhelming, and Rocket Knight was kind of forgettable, but this series is without its "we don't talk about that one" black sheep, which is a stake few series can claim. The original Rocket Knight Adventures is a masterpiece, and its sequels aren't slouches. I guess the best I can hope for is another mountain of emails when the 5th game is announced. I'll do my best to manage. Cheers.